Thank you all for coming out today to participate with our last speaker for the 2019 Ethics Week. My name is Tessa, and I have the honor of introducing our speaker for today. So David Polgar is a tech ethicist. He is the founder of All Tech is Human. He is the co-host of the podcast Funny as Tech. That one gets me. And then he's also the advisor for programs committed to thoughtfully considering the ethics surrounding technology and using tech for good. If that's not enough, David Polgar is also on CBS This Morning. He's been on BBC World News. He's been on The Fast Company, Sirius XM, and the Associated Press. This is not David's first time speaking to our university, and he had the highest number of attendees at his presentation 3 or 4 years ago here. So please help me welcome back David Polgar.
All right, how's everybody doing?
Good.
Doing well? All right, we want to bring a lot of energy today because, frankly, there's a ton going on in this area, right? One of the things that we were just discussing is, as mentioned, I was here a couple of years ago, and what I will say is that a few years ago, when I was going out, I have a background as an attorney and college professor. When I was going out saying that, oh, we need more people to be thoughtful about how we are developing and deploying technologies, there frankly wasn't a space for that. So I kind of carved out this space as a tech ethicist. And since that time, there's a lot more going on. I think we've reached a point, that's what we want to discuss today. We've reached a point where we're realizing both the promise and peril of our emerging technology to either craft a world that's more connected, more just, or, as the title of this talk, like a sci-fi novel or movie, right? A dystopian future. How do we prevent that? I'm an optimistic guy, so I do believe, since I'm on the ground floor and I see advocates, board leaders, people in big tech who are concerned, I see firsthand the amount of interest, right, running All Tech is Human. So I am hopeful that we are going to have a bright future, a better tech future. But at the same time, one of the reasons why I call the organization All Tech is Human is because it's created by us. Right? It's up to our human agency. And I think that was something that was kind of missing. Oftentimes when we think about technology, we think of it in almost defeatist types of terms, right? As if the future is happening to us, as opposed to we are creating the future. We're the ones deciding norms of behavior, saying if something is going too far, is not appropriate. We're the ones who create the oversight. We're the ones who can protest if we find something unethical, if we think that it lacks trust or transparency or fairness. So what we're going to talk about for about the next hour is some of these insights that personally I've kind of seen on my end, and how we can build an ability to really think deeply about these issues and truly make an impact. And I will say, I've been up early. I've been up actually since 2:30 this morning. Granted, I flew from the East Coast, so you have a little bit of a time difference, but it's more so that there is so much going on in this issue. I really wanted to kind of think about some of these latest topics that we'll discuss. Okay, so let's just back up. When you think of dystopia, right, you think of the kind of contrast between utopian vision versus dystopian vision, right? It's really important right now because oftentimes creators of technology tend to describe it in utopian visions. So you look at something like a smart city. There's a lot of controversy right now on something called Sidewalk Labs, associated with Google, that's developing a smart city in Toronto. But how do we ensure that we're closer to that utopian vision? Because oftentimes, creators, they lack a certain insight or might have blind spots in their thinking. But now let's flip it around. when we think of a dystopian future, what do we tend to think of, right? If you're like me, you think of, has anybody seen the movie Minority Report? Right? And that was also based on Philip K. Dick novel. Philip K. Dick, really probably one of the most influential. We're coming up with a lot of these dystopian threads or ideas. Well, Minority Report, as you remember, was really kind of dealing with this idea of predictive analytics, something that has dramatically increased since Minority Report, since even the movie, right? This idea that there might be a quote-unquote thought police that was also mentioned in Orwell's 1984, that it would get in the way of free will, right? Well, how outrageous is something like Minority Report? Obviously not too outrageous, because these are the issues that we're focused on now, right? We're worried about predictive policing, which is really using a combination of machine learning algorithms to make predictions based on past type of behavior and then project that forward. And then also facial scanning, right? We now are using this phrase, the surveillance economy, this idea that there's so many cameras all over, and then could we start scanning faces? Even just think about that right now, because oftentimes we think about these issues in the abstract. And that's what we want to break free from, right? Because these are not abstract issues. These are very practical issues, in the sense that, what if we took this idea and we said, let's scan all of your faces, right? So let's imagine we scan your face. Okay, well, does your type of face, does it have a correlation with some type of likelihood of criminal behavior, right? So what if your type of jaw structure correlated with past criminals? How does that now get applied to you? How do we adjust for your skin color? Other factors, right? How do we feed into a system? And there's something that has really come up a lot lately, right? How do we trust a system? Is it fair? And the reason why we have to go back to this idea that all tech is human is because one of the earlier issues we were having with this concept is we just assumed, we even call it machine bias, we assume that whatever is spit out, right? If they say, okay, this person is going to do X, that we just trust the machine, right? And a topic lately is that, kind of the garbage in, garbage out idea, right? Could there be a lot of bias baked into the system based on how the system was fed? And also, more existential type of questions is, how does that get in the way of your own uniqueness as an individual? I also think when we consider dystopian futures, we think of 1984, right? So everybody know the concept of Big Brother. Big Brother is watching you. I think what Orwell might have had a little off is that most of the surveillance is actually coming from us, as opposed to typically from more governmental types of ideas, right? We're almost, if we're checking into a location, if we're carrying on a smartphone, we're kind of our own ability to surveil, which can then go to a larger system. So let's think about that, right? This is a screenshot from a Chinese company of what they're working on. This ability to use facial recognition, scan, make predictions. Can we find out, right? Maybe did something where they should be questioned, right? Again, the tricky part from an ethical framework is that all of our technologies have a utopian premise, right? But a dystopian potential. And that's really what we're getting across. Give you an example. A few months ago, it was going to be the anniversary of the Columbine school shooting, right? And there was a person in Florida who wanted, they thought, for some reason, they wanted to celebrate this. So law enforcement, rightfully so, was freaking out, saying, we know this person is driving across country or flying to Colorado. We need to stop her before something happens, right? So you see how there's a lot of leverage for the promise of technology, because that's a situation where you say, wow, facial recognition was able to say, this is who this person is. Then we would celebrate that. At the same time, how does this dovetail into our expectations of privacy, our expectations of really dignity, right? Basically, what's our freedom to be anonymous? What's our freedom to not be under surveillance? And these are some of the deeper questions that are coming up. I'm also thinking this is something we might be a little less familiar with. This idea, and they use a bunch of different names for it, but you call it brain-computer interface. This is based on a recent release from Elon Musk, who has a company focused on brain-computer interface. And this is the seemingly far-out sci-fi idea that we can basically read your thoughts, and that your thoughts can lead to actions, and that we can effectively merge your brain and an AI. Right? Again, it sounds sci-fi, but you can watch YouTube videos where this is being done effectively. Right? You even have a really positive example where I think I'll show it in a little bit, where it's used on paraplegics who can think something, and then, as I'll show you, can drink soda, right? Or can play a game, can move a robotic arm. Really amazing, positive uses. So again, the idea is that the complication we face is that every technology is wrapped up into both a utopian ideal, but also the capability to go sideways. And what we're really trying to get at today is, how do we create a better system of thinking of the ethical quandaries to lessen the chance that our technologies, our emerging technologies, go sideways. So anyways, we framed it as, when you think of, or when you visualize a dystopian future, right? You think of Terminator, you think of Minority Report, 1984, right? But now, when you're actually worrying about it, what you're truly worried about is trust, respect, integrity, fairness, transparency, accountability, right? Start looking and reading these articles on all of these topics dealing with facial recognition, algorithmic bias, brain-computer interface. They're always dealing with these issues because it's the lack of them that oftentimes is what has us concerned, right? It's, can we trust the technology? Does it respect our values? And a big part there that I've seen firsthand, that I like to point out, is I deal with a cross-section of people in big tech, also board leaders, academics, students, artists, designers, advocacy groups. And to respect our values also means that we need to understand what our values are, right? And I think there's oftentimes a disconnect, because guess what? We're all different. And when you segment into types of careers people get into, oftentimes certain types of people, and then if I'm speaking about technologists, their expectation or value framework might be different than the public at large. And frankly, I think that's where a lot of the friction is coming from, is that what we value collectively is not always inserted into the process that is developing and deploying these technologies. Because the people who are actually developing and deploying the technologies are not sitting here and are not surrounding themselves with a broad collection of the general public. Right? Most of the technology is coming out of Silicon Valley, which is its own bubble inside of a bubble. Right? And how does that get in the way? Continuing on, right? Integrity. These are a lot of the hot issues that are coming up right now, and frankly, that obviously dovetails with trust. We have shifted so much power from governmental bodies to, right now, a lot of large tech companies, and so I respond to big tech. And that also depends on integrity. And frankly, I think that's why oftentimes we feel nervous about this, right? Who has heard the idea that Twitter or Facebook is a public square? Right? Don't we like to say, oh yeah, social media is a public square? Well, you gotta point out that guess what? You know what a public square has? Rules of law. And it has transparency. Because it's based on legal jurisprudence, where we say, okay, here's what free speech means. We have court cases about it. We have precedents about this. You can't be arbitrary, capricious. You have to treat people generally the same. That's transparency. That's based on a broad system of democracy that allows checks and balances. We have transferred that effectively to one company, and even more interesting, that one company has a leader who has voting control over that one company, which would effectively mean that we've transferred, if we're calling it public square, we've transferred what would have collectively been in a checks and balance system of democracy to now one person. Therein lies the rub. Right? Therein lies why we feel a lot of anxiety towards Facebook, as we'll discuss in a little bit. Also, the ideas of ensuring fairness. Is there transparency? Easier said than done, because a lot of big tech companies, we call it like black box algorithms, right? They like to say, well, this is proprietary. I can't share what I'm doing. So there's a big movement right now to say, okay, well, we need transparency and accountability and fairness within these algorithms. And also accountability. Why do you think there's such a big movement right now in whether or not big tech should be broken up? Right? That's a huge part of Senator Elizabeth Warren's campaign. It's a huge point for a lot of people. In the leaked discussion from Facebook that was just released online 2 days ago, The Verge, a media outlet, found this kind of recording, and then they published this. I'll discuss some of the questions in today's kind of talk. But one of the things that Zuckerberg was saying was, frankly, that what would happen if we were broken up, right? This is something that they're actively thinking about, and that really gets at accountability. What I think we are thinking about is, if we have transferred this power, well, we're Americans. Shouldn't there be a check on that power? What is that check on that power? What do we do if that power is abused? Because guess what? You can vote out a president. You can't vote out somebody who has voting control of a company, right? So an interesting situation that always happens there. Okay, so let's look at some of these examples and then kind of walk through them, and then also start thinking of ideas too, because I know we definitely want a lot of kind of like discussion, Q&A towards the end as well. So if we look at this brain-computer interface, again, it sounds sci-fi. They're spending a tremendous amount of money on this. It works, right? So this was the positive example that I talked about. Amazing video, and there's a bunch on YouTube. That's the positive one. On the flip side, interestingly enough, this is also something that Facebook is working on, right? This is where you always want to back up and say, okay, right? How can this go sideways? If there is one question that I would want every technologist to ask, is this: how did this go sideways? Because as we've seen in the current techlash, what have these tech leaders said? I couldn't have predicted this. I didn't foresee how this would be abused by authoritarian governments. I didn't understand how this could happen. Well, we're here today talking about how we can understand this, how we should create a better system. So Facebook is working on this. They've made a lot of advances. So you would have the ability in the long-term future to think something and post it on the platform, right? Consider that for a minute. Think about all the thoughts you've had over the last week. Think about all the bad thoughts you've had that you would never want your closest friend to even know, right? Think about how many times you think of something that you would want stored kind of in that freedom of mind idea, the sanctity of your brain, of who you are. We're reaching a point, interestingly enough, where we might start segregating now, which is dramatically different than we've always thought about these issues. Even with criminal law, we talk about the mental state and the act, the actus reus and the mens rea. And there's no such thing as a thought crime, right? So you can think the worst thing you could think. I want to X. I want to do the worst thing you can imagine. That's not a crime, right? So there are thought crimes. However, we're now reaching a point where we have brain-computer interface that would allow our thoughts to be more accessible, right? So this is something that, obviously from that type of perspective, and more, here's where it comes into play. Again, a lot of frustration over Facebook. That's why I think people make things like this, which dovetail nicely, with 1984. So one of the questions that Zuckerberg was asked, and again, this was kind of a Q&A. What they do at Facebook is kind of like a Reddit style, kind of where you can ask anything. And they do this at Facebook where employees ask Zuckerberg what's on their mind. And it's a more candid discussion than would happen in more of a PR, communications, very scripted, interview on TV. So anyhow, somebody must have recorded it, and then they leaked it. But there were a lot of interesting questions. So I would highly recommend everybody checking this out again. Verge is the media outlet that put this out there. So I found this question interesting, right? It's talking about Neuralink. That's the Elon Musk-backed company making progress on brain-computer interface. That last question. What do you think of privacy in a world where we could capture purchasing intent and deliver ads using a direct brain link? Right? That's what you want to start thinking about. And it's interesting to note that people within the company are generally concerned about this because you're realizing the potential that if you crack open somebody's emotional state, somebody's thoughts, that's also an incredible vulnerability, right? Because if I knew you were thinking of ice cream, then I'd show you an ice cream ad. But then it could get a little more insidious, right? Where if I knew maybe you were feeling vulnerable, then maybe I would show you ads. And I'd say, okay, maybe this is a time where people make more purchases. Maybe you're so vulnerable, maybe you're feeling sad that maybe you're going to splurge on something. So now I send you, links to say, purchase this, luxury item or go on vacation or something like that. Okay, how would this be used? It also gets into the idea of what is the role that technologies play if they know your emotional state. Because this is a big thing they're doing right now with reading people's face, or also looking at how they're typing, something called digital phenotyping, which makes predictive kind of correlations based on how quick you're talking, how fast you're typing, how hard you're typing the keys, when you're sending messages, and tries to make predictions of where you're going to go, how you're going to act, right? But the interesting part that is going to come up is, let's imagine that you have technology right now that knows you're feeling depressed. Okay. Well, we know everything on the web is usually ad-based. But now, from that perspective, is that an opportunity for me to play you, let's say, a sad song? Because that would mimic your behavior, right? Should I say, okay, this person's depressed, therefore I should send them something depressing? Which is actually an assertion that went against Instagram recently for an individual who, because of her actions, and because we set an algorithm to feed behavior, or feed something based on her behavior, kept on funneling this individual, right? Sad photos, because she herself was sad. So there's a lot of interesting things that can happen with that. Or, do they have a role in improving our wellness? So if you're feeling sad, should I send you something happy? Should I improve your mood? Right? These are some of the deeper questions that are happening. Also, I really like this one. Another person asked Mark Zuckerberg, how are you able to balance your financial responsibility to Facebook's shareholders with your moral responsibility to the larger society, right? To society. So these are the deep questions. He punted on that a little bit and kind of talked about his, well, he has voting control, therefore he's not beholden to anybody. He was kind of trying to, pivot and use that as a benefit. But it really gets to the larger idea that this is this new kind of awakening that is happening. Is that people are realizing, wow, technology is not just, something that's in my pocket, right? Everybody's walking around, everybody I'm sure right now has a smartphone on them. That's not just some piece of technology. That affects how you live, how you love, how you learn, even how you die. It mediates your reality. It changes how you see the world, right? That's heavy, but that's also a heavy responsibility on how we design these technologies. Because as we know, we're designing technology. But technology, of course, is always designing us. And I think that's what we are kind of waking up to, is that we want to make sure that the technology that is designing us is also designing a future that we want to live in. And if it's not designing a future that we want to live in, how can we inject better systems of trust? How can we ensure integrity? How do we ensure fairness, transparency? What do we do with that? So I will get to a couple ways that I've seen pop up recently on this, right? Talk about that. Basically, what I've kind of noticed in my work is that if you wanted to frame how different types of people think, one of the issues that's happening, and frankly this is just the classic Jurassic Park issue. Great movie, of course, I'm sure you've seen, but just the idea that just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? Jeff Goldblum's character said. But that is frankly what is happening a lot of times. But it's three parts. And my argument, really, is that we need to merge these three parts. Because right now they're completely segregated. And that is what's creating a problem. And also, because they're segregated and because they're moving at different speeds, that's where the problem happens. So we know that technology is moving quickly. Well, guess what moves really slowly? Congress. Guess what's in charge of maintaining a certain level of rule of law, of the general safety of the public? That's creating safeguards, yet that's moving at a speed that oftentimes is reactionary as opposed to proactive. In addition, we know a lot of tech companies know that and oftentimes use that as a strategy. This was the strategy for Uber and Airbnb that I talked about last time we were here, to basically say, okay, we know that this is somewhat illegal currently, but we're just going to push it so hard because we know that the legal process moves so slow. And then it's a wag the dog type of strategy, get enough people on board, and then you change the laws. But where we're at right now is engineers. Is this feasible? Is this possible? And that's not a bad thing, right? That's what I want to point out, is you always want somebody who is unfettered, who is just saying, can I do something? Right? So right now there's obviously a lot of tension in making technologists and making Silicon Valley more ethical, which is good, but at the same time, I don't think we should think that that is the sole solution, because it's a terrible idea. Because then you're just putting the onus on one actor as opposed to creating the processes which would allow for the natural checks and balances and interplay. Ethicists, should I do this? We know you can, but what would happen? What's the impact? What's the downstream? What are the negative externalities? Again, with a lot of social media scandals, something that the technologists are saying they had no idea. But there were a lot of people who did have ideas. So what I'm getting at is that was part of the issue, is that because we didn't allow for this infusion of the different types of thinkers who would allow the necessary checks and balances, that's where a lot of the problems. But also law, must I or can't I? What needs to happen, again, very segregated right now, but if we can merge this system where we know that they're all playing together, then we would actually solve, I believe, a lot of these issues. So, on one hand, we can talk about trying to slow down the speed of tech, but that's probably a losing battle, because, right? Tech companies are also competing against Chinese AI companies, geopolitical issues. You can't really slow down, American ingenuity. But what you could do is you could speed up the process of how you think about this, how you create safeguards to the technology that we're developing and deploying. So I think if we can merge that all together, we'd be much, much better shape. Another thing that's been helpful, I want to point out, is we have started to kind of break these down. This is, if you go to ethicalos.org, into saying, we're thinking about a lot of the ethical issues that we're struggling with. we can actually break them down into these kind of problematic areas. So there's been a lot of discussion about digital wellness and kind of this dopamine economy, attention economy, right? The Center for Humane Technology is launched and received a lot of kind of media attention. But there's also the surveillance kind of state that we discussed, machine bias. So kind of breaking that down just offers an opportunity to really kind of think about these issues more kind of holistically. All right, now we have some hopefully fun examples about why this is disconnected or how this is disconnected. Because I see this all the time. There's a disconnect because right, there's that Yiddish phrase that Malcolm Gladwell used a bunch of years ago to say to an earthworm in horseradish, the world is horseradish. Right? And the idea behind that is your world is the people that you're talking to that form your sense of reality. And oftentimes, what is happening in tech development is somebody's reality who's creating something might be different than your sense. They might have a different sense of the world and where they see the future. Right? So here's a couple examples. Right? That was Sergey with Google Glass. You may remember Google Glass. Yeah. So a huge flop. What's interesting about that is, right, we look at that now and usually people are like, oh my God, of course that flopped. You look like a cyborg, right? We're humans. We're not cyborgs. That's a big difference. But at the time, they put a ton of money behind it. They had fashion models in New York going down the runway with Google Glass on. They were saying this is the way the future is going to develop. Because that was the onward path. To basically say, well, we're obviously getting more connected, therefore why wouldn't we have wearable tech on our face? And in his TED Talk, he even talked about how that was going to be less distracting. Because guess what? A lot of times people look down at their phone. While phubbing, right? They're not paying attention to it because they're looking at their phone. Well, wouldn't it be great if they didn't have to look down? Well, we know that this led to a huge backlash. All right, we called people, names who were wearing glass. We looked at them kind of askew, and actually led to a few physical fights. And why? Why did we have a problem with glass? Because at the same time, it's not always about utility. It's not always about, hey, this frees up my hands. It's also about what are my expectations? Oh yeah. What are my expectations for privacy? Right? What do I want when I walk into a room? If I'm out at a restaurant with friends, how would I feel if everybody could theoretically record me? Right? How does that impact me? And that's why it failed. Okay? Because our expectations about respect for privacy and for human dignity and for some semblance of anonymity came head first, right? So oftentimes, when we're creating technology, we're not thinking, or the people creating it aren't thinking about the societal impact. And that, of course, is a problem, right? Because we're not creating something that is just like serving somebody tacos, something that doesn't matter, right? It's tacos. It's good. But it's not impacting the human condition, right? Whereas At the same time, we have our individual kind of aspect, but we also have our societal aspect. And we have technologies that are running headfirst into this. So I really like this example of Google Duplex. So I have just a quick video that I'm going to show that should point out this disconnect that is going on. So I'll frame it here, is that Google Duplex is an AI assistant. It's still working on it, they made some changes. About a year and a half ago, they did this demo that I'm going to show the video for. And in the demo, we're going to hear this AI assistant, so not a real person, call on behalf of somebody to make a haircut appointment, right? To make a reservation at a restaurant. What I love about this video is it shows the disconnect. Because the general public, as soon as this came out, the general public said, oh my God, that's a terrible idea. In the sense that the tech wasn't terrible. That's fascinating. That's incredible. It's innovation. But the terrible idea in the sense that, well, what is that level of respect? What's that level of transparency? If I get a phone call and I think that I'm talking to another human, and that AI assistant is even mimicking things of empathy, concern, and pausing, then that means I'm extending my kind of empathy, right? I'm listening for the pausing. I'm saying, wait, did I? Because when you listen, if we were having a conversation, you're trying to read my voice and the inflection of my voice and say, oh, did I offend him? Why is he pausing? Is he upset? Is he confused? Do I need to explain something? You're expending your energy, your emotional energy that's finite, that's limited. And if you were expending that on something that's not real, well, how does that make you feel? Right? You'd feel bamboozled, right? You'd feel a lack of respect. That, of course, is not the reaction that the technologists who are filling this room and watching this demo have, right? So I want you to think about that when you watch this, is that the world was outraged, but how do a group of technologists react to this very same technology? Because that is important. If we are trying to create a more ethical tech ecosystem. If that's not working, I can kind of lead to the punchline, right? So it did work when we tested it out. The interesting part about this video, and I highly recommend you checking it out, is that for the technologists in the group, they loved it, right? Because what do technologists always want? They want they're chasing after the Turing test, right? Maybe after Alan Turing, the imitation game, the ability that if you can mimic human intelligence, that's why we call it artificial intelligence. Right, in the imitation game that Alan Turing came up with, the idea was that we have artificial intelligence when another human wouldn't know that they're not talking to another human, wouldn't know that they're talking to a machine, right? So for the audience, they loved it, right? They were amazed because they were saying, this is great. I can't believe that the person answering this call doesn't know. This AI assistant sounds so realistic. Isn't this what we want, right? But the reaction, of course, was different. Within about a week, Google had to backtrack. Google had to say, oh, we made a mistake. We need to inject transparency into our technology. But the more important question that I want you to think about is, okay, it's great that public pressure changed the company to make something that the general public wanted. However, it doesn't solve the problem of what is wrong with the process where a incredibly successful, right, large, ton of capital company would create something, and there's nobody in that loop who would say, hey guys, technology, that's awesome. But you know what might be less than awesome? The fact that somebody doesn't know if they're talking to a bot. How would that make them feel? Is that respectful? What does the general public think in terms of transparency? Do we care if we know if we're talking to a bot or if we're talking to a human? What are the shared sense of values? So what's so remarkable about this video, and again, I hope everybody does check it out on YouTube, again called Google Duplex, is that shows the disconnect. Because nobody was in the audience saying, whoa, wait a minute. Again, how do you segregate that? And I think a lot of times that happens because you have two different angles that people approach issues on. If you are solving just the can I, then that's what you're hyper-focused on. You would have to naturally put blinders on and say, can we do this? So then the framework that you're analyzing it by is based on, well, how human does this seem? In Google Duplex, it seems incredibly human. Again, intentionally putting pauses and ums and ahs. That seems very, very human, right? This kind of plays out in a funny way. I tell like a little side story. It kind of showcases this issue. An example about 2 years ago where I received a direct message from somebody on Twitter. And then it happened right after we connected. So I thought, okay, I wonder if it's automated. And then it said, hey David, like your stuff, great, blah, blah, blah. Have a great day. But then this person spelled day wrong, spelled it D-A-E, and then exclamation point, exclamation point. And then a minute or two later, sent an embarrassed emoji. Oh, sorry about the typo. I meant day, D-A-Y. But because I focus on this stuff, I was a little skeptical. I said, well, how interesting would it be if we have now reached a point where we are automating our humanness, right? Where in order to showcase that we are human, we would intentionally put a typo because the error is human, right? So I have another Twitter account, and what I did is I just followed this person, they followed me back, and then they sent me the exact same message. Have a great day. Day, exclamation point, embarrassed emojis, right? I point that out because these issues are happening. All of these topics, they might seem distant and removed, but these issues of transparency and trust, they're knocking at our doorstep. Because we see, like if anybody who's using Gmail, you see smart compose. Right? We're seeing the ability to say, we can start automating our speech. Right? Who here uses Smart Compose on Gmail? Right? Yeah. That's just the feature where it says, hey, we kind of know what you normally type, so we know you're going to say hey, and then we can put in the person's name. But we have the technology where we could have it where you automatically reply. So if you send me a message, maybe my bot writes something back to you. We're there. They're just slowly rolling this out because they don't want to freak people out. But they already have this. So the point is, how does that deal with transparency? Right? How does that bother us? Does it matter? Or do you care whether it's coming from me or your friend or their bot? Right? What about attribution? So the three ways that we've seen how we can actually improve tech. And this is where I want to point out that one of the mistakes I think that oftentimes happens, at least from my perspective, is that we tend to have kind of a binary function with how we think about issues, right? We tend to say, okay, so then is the problem that we need more government? Is the problem that we need more personal responsibility? Is the problem that we need big tech to fix what they're doing? And really the answer is all of the above. And I think that's oftentimes what we struggle with, is the nuance. But we want to think that oftentimes a lot of issues that we deal with daily have a nuance of factors, right, that create this interplay. Quick example is, right, if you hop in a car and you care about car safety, right, you care about being safe. Well, think about the interplay. You've got a driver's license. You're cognizant of other people around. You've got that personal side. You've got the car manufacturer who they're testing the cars. They're making sure that they're not faulty. There's accountability if they're making faulty cars, right? And then you have the governmental responsibility. Are they keeping the roads clear of debris? Right? Are they lighting up signs? Wait, are they putting law enforcement to stop people who are speeding, which would be a danger to their safe driving? So safe driving, that's a classic example of, it's an interplay. That's where we're at with tech. So if we're trying to embed and increase more ethical thinking and behavior within technology, we need to really approach it on the actual tech workers, increasing that, then the company oversight and their processes. Also, the public oversight. So all of these matter. And so just some quick examples of how this is really coming to play, because there's a ton going on in this, right? So if we're talking about, hey, how do we make technologists more ethical? Big issue right now. So you have a bunch of foundations that just poured in a decent amount of money to say, okay, maybe part of the problem is that we need to have ethical training, or we need to have CS, computer science majors take ethics classes. Maybe we need to increase that, right? So that's why I say with great code comes great responsibility. This is just a quick example. I know there's a ton there, but this just shows that there has been a big movement, and this is from AI Now Institute, based in New York, is that there has been a ton of movement. Coworker.org is one of them, of workers actually taking on this responsibility to say, well, wait a minute. I'm the one who's actually coding this. So if I'm bothered, if I have, an ethical issue with this, then what is my responsibility? Should I have to say, no, then I won't do this. This is going against my level of values, right? Showcasing their kind of importance. You also now have company oversight, right, in how they're changing them. Salesforce has been kind of a leader in this space. They're kind of seeing this as a huge need, and that's why they recently just kind of hired a chief ethical humane use officer, since even expanded into more roles, right? So, if anybody's interested, this is also probably future career options kind of in this space as well, as this expands, right? Because now we're actually saying, okay, there's not a lot of people who have thought deeply about this, who have asked about whether we're acting with integrity, whether there's transparency, whether there's accountability. Then we need to do that. We need to make those roles. And I think one of the problems that oftentimes happens, and I deal with this on a daily basis, is that people think that technology is just for technologists. And that could be farther from the truth. Is that technology is society. Therefore, we need all these different types of backgrounds. We need to make it more multidisciplinary, broad thinking, inclusive. Right? You also have Facebook. You might have seen this. They recently kind of expanded on the Supreme Court idea. Well, that shocked a lot of people, and they've since kind of changed the name to this kind of more bland oversight type of board. But the reason why, and this is something I think a lot of times people don't always think about, is this is not a power grab, usually from tech companies who want this. It has happened because there's been a disconnect sometimes between governmental bodies, which are moving really slow, and tech, which is moving really fast, and there's been a transfer of power. And a lot of these big tech companies, they don't want to deal with these ethical quandaries, right? So they're trying to say, okay, we know there needs to be some level of transparency and accountability. How do we create that? We know we can't have it fully from a company because that's not democracy, right? So now they're forming this board that would create something very similar to Supreme Court types of decisions, right? With precedents, with some level of transparency over how they're making these decisions. EY, this just happened a few days ago. They're also establishing their kind of AI ethics board, right? And then public oversight. We knew this was from last April when Mark Zuckerberg was in front of Congress, right? So all of these are essential. So you always want to go back and say, okay, if we want to increase ethical tech, focus on the personal side, focus on the company side, but also focus on public oversight. They're not always easy in the sense that we've had struggle to come up with a lot of our laws. So even right now, there's a huge demand for a national privacy, federal privacy law, which still has not happened, even though there's a tremendous amount of public demand for it. So that's something that's going to have to change. Saw this recently. Washington State is looking into analyzing algorithms because they're caring about the fairness and the accountability and the transparency, because algorithms are affecting what job you get or don't get, or whether you even see a job offer. Right? Huge issues that are coming up. This is one that I think should speak to a lot of what you're probably thinking about, right? This just happened. We're now using facial recognition technology to analyze how people react in a job interview. Okay? And to make predictions on whether this would be an ideal hire, on how you're reacting. Right? So if you didn't think you had enough to worry about before with a job interview, now you're going to say, well, am I smiling enough? How much am I supposed to smile? Right? How am I supposed to react to this? What does my face look when they ask me, certain questions? How does this impact us? Right? This is a company called HireView. It's typically, of course, wrapped up actually in the utopian language. Because think about it, there is a utopian vision for this, in the sense that, guess what? Our system right now is not perfect, because hiring managers tend to say, oh, I want to hire somebody I can imagine hanging out with. That's completely biased. because it's also based on your upbringing and your frame of reference, that you might naturally select people closer to your own ethnicity. They know this. They know this is a problem. So on one hand, Hired You can say, hey, we're actually removing human bias from the system. But then the flip side is, well, how is this algorithm being trained? Right? What type of data went into the system? What is the right amount of smile? Right? What's too much? What's good? These are tough questions. Right? Can we ensure the fairness? Is there transparency? Is there accountability? Now we also want to look at one of my favorite ones. There's actually a lot going on in what they like to call post-death communication. Right? Sounds outrageous, but no, we do actually have this. People are working on this. There's a company called Autonomy, and they started a few years ago based on a simple pitch of saying, hey, when you want to Skype with your deceased loved ones. Okay. Right? Seems interesting because we've always had a natural tendency to want to prolong our life. We've always had the desire when somebody is dying to say, well, I don't want them to go. I want to continue talking with them. There's a strong desire. But then how does that butt up against acceptance of death at the last stage of Kubler-Ross? And who are we talking about? Or who are we talking to? Right? So let's imagine that you set yourself up where you're kind of turned into kind of an algorithm in the future based on your previous behavior, based on your likes, what you're doing. Really not super hard to do in the sense that long after you're dead, you could see what the weather is. Really, so you could interact with somebody and say, wow, I see that it's 68 degrees. They would know where you are. They could, based on location data, you could have that conversation. But then you want to start thinking about, well, what's that impact, right? What's that impact to us? How does that affect us? And what we should do. All right, so I really like this quote, and then we're going to we have about 8 or 9 minutes, hopefully, for some discussion, for some Q&A. But every technology asks us to confront human values. It's a good thing, because it causes us to reaffirm what they are, right? And I think that's where we're at right now, is that technology is so consequential that it behooves us to say, okay, we know that trust is important and transparency, and that there needs to be accountability. But we also need to, right, understand our shared values and then focus this from a multi-pronged approach, where we're looking at it from this personal level, increasing ethics training, responsibility. They're even talking about professionalizing it, which they've done for doctors and attorneys, right? Having some type of license that maybe they could lose, right? Is there some type of code? Is there a democratic oath of sorts? Also, from the company perspective, how do they create steering committees, oversight boards, ethics boards? Hasn't always been successful right now. Google tried to do their ethics board, quickly kind of disbanded because of some political issues, but that's also an important part. And then from a societal level, right? How do we create a public policy? How do we create a more open and transparent system that embeds the fairness that we would always kind of expect Because this is important, right? Because really, this is impacting, again, how you live your life, how you see the world. So frankly, couldn't be anything, this is my passion, but frankly couldn't be anything more important. So again, I want to thank you for your time, but we do have a couple minutes for some questions. Do stay in touch as well. So thank you. All right, so we have about 6 or 7 minutes before we head out. So does anybody have any thoughts or questions that we can kind of dig into? We want to really kind of explore. I know there's a ton of issues with algorithm bias, with fairness. So what are certain ones that people had? Are there any questions or comments? What are we thinking? Yeah.
What do you think of Tesla's summon feature and what they're doing in the outcry against it?
Yes. Yeah. Would you want to kind of expand on that then for the?
So Tesla now developed technology, software updates that will give you the ability with your phone to summon your car from a parking lot if you're 200 feet away within the line of sight of the car. But the problem was it was getting into accidents now. It's running over the curb. It's hitting pedestrians. But they say it's ready to go. But there's also video that's showing other ones.
It's ready to go if you don't mind hitting a few pedestrians. And then, as we know, right, Tesla was that about a year ago where they did have the death that caused like a huge kind of crisis. I think what's interesting about that is that's another issue of seeing kind of a disconnect, because you've had this fascination based on autonomous vehicles and self-driving vehicles, which have a certain amount of potential. But now we're also trying to say, well, what's the societal kind of impact for that? And then I think the fact that we have allowed certain kind of capabilities to expand faster than our public policy has been part of the issue, right? So one of the problems that they're having is, can we legislate at a pace fast enough to kind of keep up with self-driving cars? I think what's also interesting is there was a story recently showing that there's also the fear that, well, how self-driving cars, how is that going to replace jobs, right? So you have a certain kind of anxiety towards that. But even with the self-driving car, questions that people didn't always think about is, okay, if we have a summon feature, if we have a world, let's say 20 years from now, where you have a lot of autonomous vehicles, well, what does that mean for traffic as well? Does that mean that you have a lot of vehicles that have 0 people in them, that are just driving around waiting to pick up people, right? And what would that do to congestion, right? So you have a lot of fun issues with that. Yeah. Any other thoughts? I think we have time for probably one more before we head out. Yeah.
So I'm thinking about this Google Duplex.
Yeah.
So do you see a future where we'll all have our own avatar, and then they'll say, I'm David's avatar calling to make an appointment for you? Is that a way to handle that, maybe?
Yes. Actually, I love that topic, and did some research on it. I do see a world where everybody does have their own avatar and kind of bot that can kind of assist with that. Because even if you look at, I know you're on LinkedIn, even if you see on LinkedIn, there's a lot of automation that's happening, because when you see somebody's new job, it says, hey, just congratulate them. It's saying you just linked up with this person. Here's automated ones. They could easily automate a lot of those features. So for example, now even on LinkedIn, it's telling you it's somebody's birthday. Well, there's not that many variations with happy birthday exclamation point. Maybe I'll put it in all caps, right? You could vary that in, like, let's say 10 variations, and then just kind of randomly throw that at your contacts. And I think we probably are going to have that in the near future. But it also seems like the public is demanding to say, okay, well then there should be a transparency around that. Because there have been talk about bot transparency. That's throwing off a lot of people. There's a lot of public pushback to say, if I'm on Twitter, I want to know if it's a chat bot or if it's a human. And likewise, I think we will have a point where humans are going to be using an assistant, and that's just based on the scalability problem, right? And there's something called the Dunbar number based on British anthropologist Robin Dunbar, which says that the average person can handle about 150 relationships. Well, we have way more than that. We have more incredible people to connect with than we can even handle. So there is going to be a lot of pressure to say, well, I need to scale that somehow. But at the same time, connection is also about something deeper than communication. It's about reciprocity of energy, showing that you care. So I think the likely future is going to be for low-level communication. When somebody asks me, hey, what time are you flying out? When are you going to be here? Are you going to this game? If that's something that my bot could answer, and then they would just receive a message to say, this is just from my bot, then that's very low-level communication. There's a company based out of New York called X.AI, and that allows everybody to have a virtual assistant, either Amy Ingram or Andrew Ingram, right, for AI. And basically what it will say is, hey, I'm Amy, I'm David's assistant, I want to schedule an appointment, and it's looking at my Google Calendar and then making the seamless part. But what's interesting about that company is they will intentionally, tell you, they have cared about transparency. They will tell you, this is from an AI assistant, not a real person. Likewise, I do think everybody is going to have a chatbot in the future for low level, but they really are going to have some level of transparency. I think there's just a huge amount of public outcry about it. But I will say that not every technologist thinks about this, because I remember I received a message about a year ago, somebody really interested in these chatbots, and I thought their message was a little creepy, because they said at the end of it, P.S. You'll never know if this was written by me or my bot, right? So I thought that was interesting, because I was saying, well, I never responded to that person, because I felt that that's disrespectful. And the reason why is important, because if you're thinking about from an efficiency standpoint, bots are incredibly efficient. But if I'm thinking about this person spent 0 time thinking about me, and I'm going to spend 10 minutes of my time looking at what they're doing and Googling them, well then you're taking advantage of me, because you're putting our levels out of whack. So I think that's a key part. So yeah, I really love a fascinating topic. So I want to thank everybody for this great discussion. Thank you.
Just a quick word. First, thank you, and I witnessed his video playing. I am a witness to that.
Yeah.
But number 2, the last thing for Ethics Week is tomorrow, starting about 11 o'clock in the foyer in Kepner, we will have Chiba Hut sandwiches. And all you have to do to get a sandwich is give us your thoughts about Ethics Week. We'll have cards. And so from about 11 to 1, depending on how,